lot of our hymns are written under times of distress and sorrow and grief. We can find a lot of these hymns in our hymnals. One such hymn is What a Friend We Have in Jesus. It was written by a man named Joseph Scriven in 1819, who lived from 1819 to 1886. He wrote these words later that were set to music. He was living a contented life in Ireland, and the night before his wedding day, his fiancée had drowned in a mishap or in an accident. Not long after this, Scriven moved to Port Hope, Canada. He moved to Port Hope, Canada, determined to devote his life in helping others in their time of need, their time of sorrow, their time of grief. And during this time, his mother became ill in Ireland. She became very sick. And he wrote her a letter to comfort her that included these words: "What a friend we have in Jesus." Sometime later, when Scriven fell ill himself, a friend who came to visit him happened to see a copy of the words that were scribbled on a piece of paper that he had written down. And it said this: "What a friend we have in Jesus." The friend asked who wrote them, and Scriven replied, "The Lord did. He wrote it between us." You know, our lives, in many cases, we can find moments where we've seen in the life of ourselves, as well as others, we seem to be sorrowful. We seem to be grieving. We have our moments of ups and downs, our highs and our lows. We seem to have moments of loss of loved ones, lost hope, it seems like. It's a result of poor test results, possibly from the doctor, as a result of losing a loved one, someone that's very close to you, a close friend. Perhaps the news of a loved one who's battling a terminally ill disease, or a disease that we have yet to find a cure. Whatever the case may be, we have our moments of sorrow and grief. Our moments where we take our requests to God's throne and tears of anguish seem to be strolling down our face. Whatever the case may be. In our lives we find moments when we find ourselves grieving and sorrowful. In the early events of the book of 1 Samuel, we can find a series of events where this sorrow fell upon a certain person. And we're going to be learning about her this morning. These events of sorrow fell upon a certain person, and her name is Hannah. Hannah. You know, she is this message of hers is pretty much a real key element of the Scriptures. Why? Because we know who her son would be. Be Samuel. One of the first prophets in the Old Testament, if not the first prophet in the Old Testament. We must remember that during this time, she was sorrowful because she could not bear children. She was barren. She was unable to provide an heir to her husband. And we must keep in mind is this: the woman's primary focus during these times in the Scriptures, and during these times that we have recorded here, her primary focus was to provide her husband with an heir that could carry on the family name. That was her primary focus. Her primary goal was to provide her husband with an heir that could carry on his name for later generations. During this time in history, it would be considered a curse, or perhaps even a means of, as a result of sin, if you were unable to bear children. That's what they would look at it as. Oh, well, you've done something wrong. You've really done something to really upset God, so He's not allowing you to bear children. He's not allowing you to have children. You've done something to upset Him, so He's not giving you your requests or helping you. Perhaps maybe God was angry with you. So that's what just a lot of the outlooks during the time from the people from the outside looking in, so to speak, will gather their input from. They'll put their own stories together. Whatever the case may be, Hannah at this time was barren, and she was unable to experience the joys of motherhood. She was unable to experience them. She wasn't able to provide a child at this time. On top of that, her home life had caused Hannah to suffer even more. She had a lot more sufferings going on in her home life due to her being barren and unable to bear children. She had a lot of sufferings simply for the fact Hannah's husband, Elkanah, had another wife as well, and she was able to provide him children. She was able to provide him with heirs, but yet Hannah was unable to. Now you can imagine what kind of life was like at home for Hannah. What her home life was truly like at this point in time. She would live in a house with her and her husband's other wife. Okay? She would live here together, knowing that she was to be able to provide her husband with children. She would see it day in and day out in her home life, knowing that she was able to provide him with children, and she was barren and unable to fulfill that role as a wife to her husband. I would imagine, as well as we're going to see, Elkanah's other wife was pretty harsh on her as well. Let's face it, a lot of times we can be harsh on people who's not as fortunate as we are. We can be harsh on them and drive them to tears of sorrow. And I couldn't imagine that Hannah's life here at home was any different, especially given the environment where she was living. I could not imagine it being any different. Like any typical man here, he walks in, he sees his wife grieving. Elkanah walks in and he sees Hannah there weeping. She's in tears. She's full of sorrow. Okay? She's sorrowful. And a lot of times, us as men are completely clueless to why our wife is sorrowful or in sorrow and agony. We're completely clueless of what's going on. We have no clue why our wife is upset. We have no clue why she is angry. And a lot of times it is expected that we should know automatically as husbands. Oh, you don't you know? I've heard that. You ought to know why I'm upset. It's as if us men are supposed to have some kind of sense of telekinesis or ability to read a woman's mind. Elkanah was no different. He walks in, he finds Hannah sorrowful and down in tears, and he has no clue why she is upset. And he would simply ask a question. And a lot of times I've learned, sometimes it's best just to keep your mouth shut. But here he asks a simple question. Why are you crying, or why are you upset? Why are you sorrowful? What's going on? And and here he would simply ask, do I not mean more to you than 10 sons? The truth is, however, that being a mother of just one son would have completely satisfied Hannah. She'd have been satisfied with just one son, but she's not able to have any. So she was at a time of grief and sorrow because of her being barren. So number one, we see this. Hannah's sorrow. She has Hannah's sorrow. It's number one. 1Samuel 1.9 gives us this account. Hannah arose after they had finished eating and drinking in Shiloh. Now Eli the priest was sitting by the seat of the doorpost of the tabernacle of the Lord. Elkanah's response to Hannah's sorrow, we see this here that he really does love her. Elkanah loves his wife without a doubt. He has feelings for her. Without a doubt, he loves her. There's an emotional attachment between him and his wife. Otherwise, he wouldn't even have bothered to say, hey, why are you crying? What's wrong? Why are you upset? He would have just went on about his way and not said anything. But he draws and gives her his attention. He loves her. And as many men, he is at least somewhat insensitive to her in a sense of case. He simply said, why are you crying? Instead of trying to console her, he said, don't I mean more to you than 10 sons? So he's a little bit insensitive. Let's face it, man, we can be insensitive. We can be pretty hard-hearted or hard-minded. He's insensitive to her. He does not recognize what she needs, or that she had needs that he could not fulfill. So instead of consoling her, he simply asks the question and gives a response. Do I not mean more to you than all those sons that you're wanting? Such as the desire of a mother, he could not provide her with that. God's the one that gives that. He could have consoled her. Hannah was in bitterness of soul and great anguish. Yet she did what any right person would do, or what she should do, and this is an example for us. She did what was right. So what did she do? She did the right thing. She took all this bitterness, all this anguish, all this sorrow, all these feelings that plagued and was weighing on her heart, and she took them and all those feelings, laid them out before God in prayer. Presented them before the Lord and honestly praying and giving them to Him. That's what she done. We can relate this to our own lives. A lot of us know what it's like to be in anguish. A lot of us know what it's like to be sorrowful. And in times and places before us that it's completely out of our hands, we have no control over it. We know what that feeling is like. It's not, let's face it, it's not a real good feeling to have. It's not good. It's something when you're not in control of something, you don't have control over it. It's not in the best position or the best state of feeling to have at that point. We have those moments in our life where bitterness begins to swell and build up inside of you. So we can relate, in a sense, the feelings that Hannah is experiencing here. We can relate to it in a sense. Okay, there's an illustration. Thomas Sutherland said that he lost his faith during a time of a hostage situation in Lebanon. God, I prayed so many times, I prayed so hard, and nothing happened. After thinking about it deeply, I'm not so sure there is a God, he added, but I never felt abandoned by my country. The headline of this story reads that Sutherland tells of captivity without bitterness. I would ask this, however. I would ask this simple question. What about his bitterness toward God? So was he really bitter? Yes, he was. So that title for that story is not really fitting. He did hold some bitterness. Hannah was going through a time in her life with a lot of problems. A lot of things were pressing. A lot of things were weighing on her mind. And a lot of questions flooded her thoughts. And no doubt that the devil himself was on her shoulders, whispering in each ear. No doubt that he's on our shoulders when we face times of sorrow and agony and anguish. That he is on our shoulders, whispering these little lies in our ear, flooding our thoughts with things that should not be in there. She had a lot pressing on her mind. And on top of all that, her husband's heart was divided. He had two wives. Her home, it was a divided home, a divided heart. Instead of being a place of refuge for trials, it was a place of trials that pressed harder upon her. Her hope had been disappointed. She was misunderstood by her husband. Yet, in all of these things, in every bit of it, there's something that we can gather from Hannah. Hannah did the right things. She wept. She prayed. She presented her petition before God. She committed the whole world that she had and the situation that she was in before God's throne of grace. Before God's throne, she laid it down. So, we have desperate prayer. We have a desperate prayer. Verses 10 and 11. It says this. And she was in bitterness of soul and prayed to the Lord and wept in anguish. Then she made a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look upon the affliction of your maidservant and remember me, and not forget your maidservant, but will give your maidservant a male child, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall come upon his head. Hannah begins her prayer by calling on the Lord of hosts, the one who's in control of all things, the one who has the whole world in the palm of his hand. She begins a prayer with that. The title Lord of Hosts is used some 260 times in the Old Testament. And has the idea of the Lord of the mighty armies is the meaning behind it. Hannah feels attacked by her rival, and so she calls on the Lord of the mighty armies, her protector, our protector in her time of sorrow and grief. That's what she does. She calls upon him during these times. Now, isn't it great to know that you can call on the Lord of the angels' armies at any time? No matter what you're facing, no matter what situation you're in, no matter what you're going through, isn't it great to know that you can call upon that Lord, the same God, at any point in time for help? It's great to know these things. We can call him on our times of hardship, the times of suffering, the times of sorrow, the times of sadness, filled with the utmost confidence that he is there and he is listening to hanging on to every word we lift up. He is there. When we do this, we have a sense of assurance that we are not alone, that He is with us. He will help us, and we have confidence of knowing that His Spirit, our helper, the helper that He sent to us after He ascended into heaven, because if I do not go into heaven, Jesus said, what did He say? The helper cannot come. So it's good that I go, so the helper can come. He sent us, He left us with a helper, His Spirit. He sent us, and He sent to us in the help in our time of need, in our time of trouble. Our helper, aid us in all we face. He's there to help us in our time of trouble. And it is in this prayer that she makes a vow to God Himself. Hannah promises that her son will work of the Lord. He will be involved in the work of the Lord. And that is that he will be a Nazarite from birth. Now there's another person in the Old Testament that's mentioned about being a Nazarite from birth. Can you recall who that was? Was that Samson? Yeah. He was a Nazarite from birth. She says, I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor shall come upon his head. According to Numbers 6:1-27, the vow of Nazarite included these following: adherence from any, or abstinence from any product from grape or vine, signifying distance from all fleshly pleasures. We also see that taking part of any of the mourning of the dead, nor to come near a dead body, because the dead show corruption, and the fruit of sin, also because the Nazarite had greater concerns from ordinary joys and sorrows from life. We see that never cutting hair, in public and visible sign, and others to the vow. Typically, the vow of the Nazarite was taken for a set, or rather a short period of time. Samuel and Samson in Judges 13:5 were unique because they were Nazarites from birth. She says in verse 11c that I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life. The child will be born a Levite, and being of the tribe of Levi, that would be already dedicated. He would already be dedicated to the Lord, because God regarded the tribe of Levi as His own possession. Okay, it was His own possession. But the time of Levi's special dedication to the Lord only lasted between the ages of 30 and 50. Here Hannah was taking something, a promise of vow that already belonged to God, and she was taking it even further. She was taking that vow even further in a sense that she gave him to the Lord all the days of his life. She dedicated him in a greater way to the Lord. And the dedication of a Nazarite, which is a greater consecration than that of a Levite. Okay? Now, we as followers of Christ may very well be dedicated to the Lord in all we do. We do this. We are dedicated to what we do for the Lord. But is there a greater dedication that the Lord wants from us? Is there a greater dedication that He wants of us? This is an interesting thought, because we see here that it would have been easy for Hannah to say simply, I don't need to dedicate my child to the Lord, because he's already dedicated. Why? Because he was a Levite. I don't need to dedicate him, because he's already dedicated. She takes matters even further. Okay? There was a deeper dedication to the Lord that the Lord was trying to draw out of Hannah. Now, is there a deeper dedication the Lord's trying to draw out of you? Just some things to think about and ponder on, because I'm not going to give the answer. I'm going to let you answer that for yourself. Is the Lord wanting more of a dedication from you? Is He trying to draw more dedication out of you? Just ponder on it. It is very difficult, if not simply impossible, to figure out God's plans in our lives. Why? Because God's thoughts are not our thoughts, His ways are not our ways. His ways are higher than our ways, and His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. We can never figure all this out. It's not meant for us to know, it's meant for us to trust. His thoughts and His ways are not our ways, they're higher than our ways. There are no doubts that all this that God wanted the little boy to be was dedicated to Him in a special way. And He had to allow Hannah to come to a place of desperation. He had to allow her to come to this place. It also is during these moments of our lives and our desperation that we are enabled to see God's marvelous works in our lives, how He works in our lives. Look back how He was there and how He provided for us in our lives. We're going to hit on that a little bit further in our Sunday school or in our message this morning. How God provides for us in our lives. Certainly this is not the first time Hannah prayed for a child. It's obvious that she prayed more than once. But perhaps it's the first time she prayed truly giving the child to the Lord. Not just in her heart, but in this vow. Prayers and tears of the saints are the best weapons, one man said. But Hannah, just as many of us, would not resort to these best weapons until bitterness, force of anguish forced her to. It brought her to realize, hey, I can't do this on my own. I can't do it alone. And without a doubt, as we read her resentment toward Elkanah's other wife, Peninnah, because of her ability to bear children, it was during these moments that our heart can reveal truly its true colors. So, we see Eli's suspicion, number 2. Now, we're going to see some things take place here from the outside looking in. Just sitting and observing how we can be judgmental as well. We have to be cautious. We have to be cautious. We see, and it happened, she continued praying before the Lord. The Eli watched her mouth. Now, she's praying, her mouth undoubtedly was moving. Okay? She wasn't just being silent with her head bowed. She was mouthing the words as she was lifting up the prayers before the Lord. And it happened, as she continued praying before the Lord, the Eli watched her mouth. Now, Hannah spoke in her heart. Only her lips moved, but the voice was not heard. Therefore, Eli thought that she was drunk. She thought she was drunk. So Eli said to her, how long will you be drunk? Put your wine away from you. It is here that Hannah is praying in her heart. She's pouring her heart and her soul out to God at this moment. She's praying in her heart, lifting it up in silence. And Eli is observing her. He can see her lips move. Perhaps actually, if he were able to hear what she was saying, maybe he would have responded differently. No doubt he would have responded differently. Instead, he begins to question her. He has some suspicion, and of course Eli misunderstands Hannah here, but the fact that he would even suspect that she was drunk, it may have been not really all that unusual during this time for someone to come in being drunk at fellowship meals. They would have been the fellowship meals during the time of sacrificing the Lord at the tabernacles. The fact that Eli suspected that Hannah was drunk doesn't speak well for all or what he had seen at the tabernacle area previously that had taken place. So he automatically suspects it. So evidently, it's happened a lot in the past. So he calls her out on it. The fact that Eli supposed her being drunken, in other words, and the other part of Eli's conduct already mentioned, and to prove the religion at this time was very low ebb, or at a low point in Shiloh. For it seems that drunken women did come to a place at times, and so did lewd women. They were often found there. They were often found in these places, sadly. Now Hannah only suffers being misunderstood by her husband. Not only that with her husband, she's being misunderstood by the high priest as well. She's being misunderstood by Eli. I would like to point something out here. We are never in or at a place that our high priest, our Lord and Savior, who is seated at the right hand of God, does not understand the situation that we're in. We will never be in that place. Now, she was misunderstood by Eli, yes. But we will never be in a place where our high priest does not understand what we're facing, that he cannot relate to. We're never in that place. He knows full and well what it's like to be in this life and what we're going through. Hebrews 4:14 through 16 gives us this account where he says, seeing then that we have a high priest who's passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast to our confession. For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize in our weaknesses, but was in all points tempted and tested as we are, yet was without sin. Let us therefore come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and grace in a time of need. He understands. He knows. A lot of times Eli just sits back and says, I'm going to let them come to me. I want to keep them there. I don't want them handle it on their own. I want to keep them close to me. It is why Eli misunderstands Hannah. He rebukes her where he sees her shameful behavior. It is Eli who will receive the Lord's rebuke as well, if you want to read ahead in judgment, from Hannah's son Samuel for his own shameful behavior regarding the conduct of his sons in 1 Samuel 3:10-18. So, we see her denial here too, her denial, verses 15-16. It says, but Hannah answered and said, no, my Lord, I am a woman of sorrowful spirit. I have drunk neither wine nor intoxicating drink, but have poured out my soul to the Lord. Do not consider your maidservant wicked woman, for out of the abundance of my complaint and grief I have spoken. Until now. It is here at this moment that Hannah responds to this rebuke and blessing. No, my Lord, I will not accept Eli's accusation. She's not going to accept it. But, however, she will not respond with a haughty or arrogant tone. She will explain herself, but she will do so in candor and kindness, remembering to who she is speaking to. She is speaking to a high priest, so she gives him respect. She says, I poured out my soul before the Lord. This is exactly what Hannah needed to do. Instead of keeping all the bitterness of her soul, all of her anguish inside of her heart, she poured it out before the Lord. She gave it all to Him. She laid it before His feet. She poured it out to Him. And when we are faced with moments like this in our lives, don't hold on to it, because it can do nothing but fester like a splinter or a thorn that gets under the skin. Pour it out. Take it out and hand it to God and give it to Him and trust in His ways. Don't hold on to it. Let it go. Don't hold on to it before the Lord so the bitterness and anguish can set in. It is like an acid that will eat you up from the insides unless you pour it out and let it go. That's what bitterness does. So number 3, we see Eli's pronouncement. Eli's pronouncement would be verses 17. Verse 17, he says there, then Eli answered and said, go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition, which you have asked of Him. Eli may have spoken this only out of a pious wish, perhaps, but it was in fact at the word of the Lord. He sends her out on her way in peace and suggests Eli hopes Hannah will find wholeness and healing in her distress and sorrow. We have a high priest listed in the Scriptures, and we are given an account of how they were less than godly men. One such account of this is Caiaphas, who spoke the word from the Lord in John 11:49-52. We see what kind of situation he was in, what kind of person Caiaphas was. He said, one of them, Caiaphas, being a high priest that year, said to them, you know nothing at all, nor do you consider that it is expedient for us that a man should die for the people, and not the whole nation should perish. But this he did not say on his own authority. But being the high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus would die for a nation, and not for the nation only. But he would gather together one from the children of God who were scattered abroad. We also see now a departing peace in 3b. Verse 18 says this, and she said, let your maidservant find favor in your sight. So the woman went her way, and she ate, and her face was no longer sad. Why? Because she placed it before the throne. She knew that God would take care of it. He would take it and do with what He wished. She handed it to God, knowing that He would take care of it. This change had taken place with Hannah, shows that she had received the promise in faith. This is something we as Christians and Christ's disciples are called not only to do, but as a necessary act of worship when we lift our requests before His throne, when we pray. We see in Hebrews 6:10-12, for God is not unjust to forget your work and labor of love which you have shown toward His name, and that you minister to the saints and do ministry. And we desire that each one of you show some diligence and the full assurance of hope until the end, that you do not become sluggish, but imitate those who through faith and patience inherit the promises. James would tell us that when we pray, we are to pray in faith. Pray believing it'll happen. Trust in God, knowing that He will take care of it. Hannah shows us that we can regain the joy of fellowship in the house of the Lord by pouring out our heart before the Lord and by receiving His word with faith. We see number 4, the Lord. Then they rose early in the morning. Verse 19. Rose early in the morning and worshiped before the Lord, and returned and came to the house of Ramah. And Elkanah knew Hannah, his wife, and the Lord remembered her. Now we covered last week how the word remember does not mean that God forgot. It wasn't going to say, oh yeah, I forgot about that. The Lord, when it says the Lord remembered, it means that He placed special attention on that. He took it into action. He placed that request into action, and He handled it. Hannah could genuinely worship the Lord in faith, and while the promise was not yet fulfilled, what a glorious pattern of faith, and knowing that she placed her trust in God and that He would take care of it. What a wonderful pattern of faith. What a great example for us to follow how God works in our moments of our lives when we demonstrate that faith, knowing that He will provide in our times of need. He will provide. And we can only imagine how different Hannah's worship was following the events that had recently taken place. Whether Elkanah and Peninnah knew the difference or knew anything different about her, perhaps her prayer on the next visit to Shiloh might be some indication of the change that took place in her heart. We can find this prayer in 2 Samuel 2:1-10 if you would like to read it on your own time. In verse 19, we see that the Lord remembered her. To use the term remember is anthropomorphism, and the way of explaining God's actions in human terms to understand if it doesn't perfectly describe His action. It doesn't mean that God forgot Hannah, and it didn't mean to come to pass immediately, but it happened over a period of time. While I'm thinking about it, I want to go ahead and read that. First Samuel chapter 2, verses 1-10. Here's Hannah's prayer. My heart rejoices in the Lord. My thorn is exalted in the Lord. I smile at my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation. No one is holy like the Lord, for there is none besides you, nor is there any rock like you, like our God. Talk no more so very proudly. Let no arrogance come from your mouth, for the Lord is God of knowledge, and by Him actions are weighed. The bows of mighty men are broken, and those who stumble are girded with strength. Those who are full have hired themselves out for bread, and the hungry have ceased to hunger. Even the barren has borne 7, and she who has many children has become feeble. The Lord kills and makes alive. He brings down to the grave and brings up. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low and lifts up. He raises the poor from dust and lifts the beggar from the ash heap, to set him among the princes and make him inherit the throne of glory. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and He has set the world upon them. He will guard the feet of His saints, but with the wicked He shall be silent in darkness. For by strength no man shall prevail. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken in pieces from heaven. He will thunder against them. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to His king and exalt the horn of the anointed. What an amazing prayer. We can see a big change in Hannah that took place, her trust in Him. Hannah had reason enough to be discouraged without a doubt. But when the promise of God came, she did not lose faith. She stayed the course. She pressed on in the promise, even when it took time. She is a great example of those who through faith and patience inherit the promises we just read about in Hebrews 6:12 a few moments ago. So the meaning is that although her husband knew her conjugally, at his return, God was mindful of her and intended in His time to give her His blessing. Responding to her prayer, verse 20. So it came to pass in the process of time that Hannah conceived and bore a son and called his name Samuel. Because I have asked him of the Lord, she said. The result that God remembered Hannah in her prayer. She lifted up in faith. A lot of times today we neglect to take our prayer serious. We don't use our prayer enough. We don't go to God like we ought to. However, James would tell us that our prayer and that the prayer of an effectual and righteous person avails much or accomplishes much. Why not start using it today? Using it and see how God works in your life. James tells us also that we do not have because we do not ask. Or we ask amiss, not believing, or without faith. We ask for our own desires instead of opening ourselves up to Him in our genuine hearts in submission to His will and His purpose. Hannah demonstrated faithfulness long before Paul wrote about the situations that he was placed in. She demonstrated faithfulness long before his time. Being thankful, we should present our request to God. She did so by taking her deepest hurt to the Lord. He in turn demonstrated His faithfulness by taking that hurt and pain away, by providing the blessing that her heart desired. It would be good for us to keep in mind, however, that we're not guaranteed to receive what we ask of God. We're not guaranteed that everything we take before God and ask of Him, that we're going to get it. His answer is always going to be yes or not. Yes, I'll give it to you. However, what we have to realize is this, that although God sometimes might say no, we have to trust that He knows what He's doing. Sometimes He says wait when we ask for something, as He did Hannah, just wait. Or as He did with Abraham and Isaac, wait, my timing is perfect. We have to trust in these moments. We don't know the future, neither did Hannah. But with her we can say this, my heart rejoices in the Lord. There is no one holy like the Lord. There is no one besides you. There is no rock like our God. That's the message of Hannah. God's faithful in our times of grief and sorrow. We may not understand it. We may not know why we're going through it. We may not understand why we have to face these valleys and wander through the darkness. But you can rest assured that God is with you. He knows and He understands.